saw the Jaguars choose to sign Marquise Lee over him. That was a where were you when type of day for me. A terrible idea, and of course, unfortunately, it didn't really work out for Robinson. He went from a bad situation to an even worse situation in Chicago.
So where were you?
I was at my apartment. I remember the day. Where else would I be? I was at my apartment looking at my phone. I was like, the Jaguars will not retain Allen Robinson. Like, well, here we go. This is what we asked.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome into Monkey Knife Fights preview show for Monday Night Football. Joined here by the best and the greatest, Nick Whalen. Little pump up on the intro there, you know. I liked what you said about Aaron Rodgers before coming on air, so you got me in a good mood. But tonight, we got a rematch of the NFC Championship game, a little divisional rivalry. It is Matthew Stafford and Jimmy Garoppolo going toe-to-toe. Jimmy G has the reins again in San Francisco. Well, kind of forced into the role, but he's looked pretty good dinking and dunking the ball down the field. This, honestly, is probably going to be another defensive slugfest divisional game. But, Nick, what are you looking for heading into Monday Night Football?
Well, first of all, I want to tell you how comfortable I feel in my Monkey Knife Fight branded sweatshirt. So make sure you go check out the Monkey Knife Fight store. This thing is thick. It is warm. It's extremely comfortable. So I want to make sure I address that first. But, yeah, I mean, as far as tonight's game goes, I'm picking the Rams. We'll go full disclosure there right away. I think they've had some concerning possessions through these first 3 weeks. Obviously, week 1 against Buffalo, that was a beatdown. But I feel like you always get weird results in that opening night game for a team coming off of a Super Bowl win. And you're feeling a little bit empty with the wins over Arizona and Atlanta, the way they played out. But I do think the Rams, they're one of those teams that seems to make the easy things more difficult than they need to be. They'll have a first and goal from the 1, and they'll throw like 3 straight difficult passing plays instead of just pounding it into the end zone. So I think if they can start to get those things straightened out, they're going to end up being a really good team. And I'm high on the 49ers. I feel like pretty much everybody was coming into the year, but man, Jimmy G did not look good against Denver last week. And this is a team that went down and scored, I think, on its first or second possession. They get a touchdown, and then they have 12 more drives the rest of the game, and not a single one of those drives went for more than 5 plays. So it's not like they were being sloppy or turning it over. Like, they could not move the ball whatsoever against that Denver defense last week. And, you're still without Trent Williams. You have some other like pretty significant injuries around the roster on the defensive side of the ball as well. You're down to your third running back. So to me, for San Francisco, this is kind of a prove it, get back on track game, because if they don't, suddenly you're kind of digging yourself in a hole in that division.
Yeah, and I love what you said about the Rams. I really just want to zero in on that, kind of making things more difficult, right? Matthew Stafford has completed 72.5% of his passes this season. The accuracy isn't the issue. The issue is he has 5 interceptions and only 4 touchdown passes. It's just they're by what the analytical breakdown of making things more difficult is precisely what the Rams are doing. And I don't know if it's Sean McVay feeling himself a little bit. He won the Super Bowl. Let's get a little creative. But realistically, until they get Allen Robinson engaged in that offense, they really do look like a one-trick pony with Cooper Cupp. Now, with that said, I think it was 4 receivers. They had 4 receivers with over 3 receptions last week. Higbee looked great. They definitely got, and Cooper Cupp only had 44 yards. But Allen Robinson, as that number 2 guy that you went out to be that number 2 guy in the absence of OBJ, they have to be able to get him involved, I feel. And that's going to be, I think, a built-in part of success tonight for this game for the Rams. Now, getting into the Monkey Knife Fight side of things, let's bring it up. Let's get some props going, baby.
Let's do it.
It's an interesting number for Jimmy G, because 228 yards based off what I saw last week is just, it's not possible. Like he looked like a toddler drowning last week in that pocket. Like it was terrible. So he's got to be able to move the ball and get it out to the Deebo Samuels, get it out to those playmakers. But 228 yards against that Ram defense with that pass rush when he struggled last week, that's tough. I'm leaning towards the less.
I'm leaning towards the less as well. And I think, a lot of it is just what's fresh in the mind from last week. And, Denver has a really good defense, so you have to give some credit there. But yeah, like you said, I mean, it's not like they were moving the ball and, drives were stalling. I mean, drives were just going nowhere. I mean, they were picking up 5-6 yards over 3 plays and punting it back pretty much immediately. And I think what concerns me is that was with George Kittle back. I think that we thought maybe that would start to unlock some things for this offense, and he was pretty much invisible in that game. And, I love Deebo Samuel, but it feels like half the games he plays, he's kind of dinged up, and they show him sitting on the bench. You're not really sure when he's going to come back in. If those guys aren't effective, this isn't really a team that has a ton of playmakers. You're putting a lot on the plate of guys like Brandon Ayuk and Jawan Jennings, who are fine players, but they're not great players by any means. So if San Francisco is not effectively running the ball, and certainly they were not against the Denver Broncos last week, if they're unable to get that going against the Rams, I don't think that means Jimmy G is just going to be, sitting back there slinging the ball 40 times. I think we could see a similar result to last week. So I'll go less on that number for Jimmy G as well.
Yeah, it's already actually dropped less on our rundown here. 228 and a half here. Jimmy G 225 and a half. So it's already trending down, and I think it continues to do so. Matthew Stafford is also trending down. His line opening up at 255 and a half, now down to 250 and a half yards. I think out of necessity, I just said they got to get Allen Robinson going. I think they're going to get the more here. It's going to be a smash mouth game. Obviously, they got Akers going last week at last, but I feel like this is an opportunity to get Allen Robinson the ball because Charvarius Ward is going to be all over Cooper Kupp. Allen Robinson is going to be able to find the windows, and he's got to be able to settle into those zones and start meshing with Matthew Stafford for this team and this offense to really start playing up to the caliber of football that they should be playing.
I think you're right. I mean, I think all that makes sense. I don't know if I trust Matthew Stafford to make it happen. I mean, you mentioned the interceptions. He's got more picks than touchdowns through 3 weeks. Didn't have a single touchdown last week against Arizona, although you should have had at least one. You think of the play to Allen Robinson, where the ball just kind of bangs off of Robinson's shoulder pad. That one should have been a touchdown. But even so, that's kind of one of those plays that I'm referencing where it's like, look, you got first and goal from the 1. You don't need to run a quick pass to Allen Robinson. To me, that felt like a forced involvement type of play where, Sean McVay's thinking like, we got to get Robinson going. Let's try to force the ball his way here. And then you end up taking a field goal on that possession. So I think we end up getting a relatively low scoring game here. I don't see either team, lighting it up necessarily through the air. So I think I'll go less on Stafford as well as Jimmy G. I think both these teams, I don't think either one is marching up and down the field. And I think, this is a game that could be played in the low 20s and the high teens. And I don't see either quarterback, really lighting it up. So I'll go less.
Yeah, well, with that said, right, the low touchdown passes for Matthew Stafford isn't really, I don't think, reflective of him being able to move the ball, right? Over 760 passing yards through the first 3 games. He's getting the yards. Mathematically speaking, the law of averages, he should be able to get 250 yards, but we'll see what happens. I like the breakdown. I really like what the San Francisco 49ers are doing on defense. So we mentioned Ward earlier. He's been lights out at that cornerback position. So I could definitely see both sides of that argument, but for entertainment's sake, please throw the ball. Please. I want to see Cooper Kupp get the more on his line because I have Cooper Kupp and I love watching Cooper Kupp play. I love watching him get off the line. I think him and Hunter Renfrow are probably 2 of the premier route runners in the league, and 105 and a half yards for Cooper Kupp this week. Nick, after that performance of just 44, does that cause hesitation, or is that a Cooper Kupp blimp in the record?
Yeah, I mean, it's cause for a little bit of hesitation, but if anything, it makes you think that he's going to be due to bounce back, right? I mean, it's like, all right, he's well below his average 1 week. He's probably going to do something to correct that this week. Yeah, I mean, this is a high number. I would prefer, it was maybe in like the mid 90 range. It's just high enough to make you think twice. But yeah, I think they make a concerted effort to get Cooper Kupp involved. But you bring up a good point. I mean, this is a good secondary for the 49ers. How much are they focusing on exclusively shutting down Cooper Kupp? I mean, last week we saw Arizona, I thought, did a pretty good job on Kupp, and there they go, get him involved on the ground. He runs in a touchdown. Like, they will find ways to get Cooper Kupp the ball, but I do think this San Francisco defense is going to be effective, in shutting him down through the air. So as always, I think Cooper Kupp, who has the highest floor of any receiver by far when it comes to fantasy, I think he has another good week, but I'm going to go less on the yardage total. I think maybe they do get him involved on the ground a bit, and maybe he has 8-9 catches, but I don't think this is a game where he's ripping off long plays. So I'll go less.
Now, you did say in there that if it was in the 90s, you might reconsider. The line has dropped to 99 and a half. So it still would be, you still would need to get the triple digits though. Does that sway your pick at all?
I assume that dropped as we were talking. The odds makers heard that, and
they
no,
heard
I mean
you.
it's still just tied up. I'm gonna say, I had a vision last night that Cooper Kupp was going to finish with exactly 97 yards. So I don't think he gets to triple digits.
All right, we have Higbee on the screen, so we might as well talk. Really got involved last week. That tight end screenplay, he just ripped off and he was gone. The 4.5 receptions, based on the game script that you're projecting, Cooper Kupp seeing a little bit less of the ball. Higbee at 5 receptions seems like a pretty good spot for a guy that will be that check down option, against a very volatile but yet effective San Francisco pass rush. They either send them all and they get there, or they drop back. So I think Higbee could be a nice spot in the screen passes, as we saw last week, and the checkdowns for Matthew Stafford. I like the more here than 5.
Yeah, me too. And we'll see. You mentioned that San Francisco pass rush. 2 key pieces of that pass rush, Javon Kinlaw and Eric Armstead, still very much questionable as of this moment. I think there's some hope that at least one of those guys plays, but it could be a slightly diminished pass rush for the 49ers. But either way, I mean, Higbee's been the number 2 receiver for this team so far. And like you said, I think, if this is a game where both teams are kind of struggling to move the ball downfield, you do see a lot of those quick checkdowns. If Matthew Stafford's under pressure, he's not going to have time to wait for Cooper Kupp or Allen Robinson to get 30 yards downfield. It's going to be a lot of those dink and dugs to Higbee. And, he's been the most consistent outside of Kupp, of course, when it comes to this Rams offense. Running backs included, receivers included. 5 catches for 39 in week 1, 7 for 71 in week 2, 4 for 61 last week. I mean, he's got 24 targets through the first 3 weeks of the season. I don't see why that wouldn't continue tonight.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And now you mentioned the other tight end earlier, the guy that was supposed to be a bit of a saving grace for the San Francisco offense, George Kittle. His line, 4.5 receptions, the exact same. I mean, which tight end shows up because they're both talented, they're both tall, they both have long hair. They're actually like, one's blonde, one's brunette. That's the only real difference that I'm getting here. Kittle, 4.5 receptions, 43.5 receiving yards. Nick, where does George Kittle fall on Monday Night Football?
Oh man, I mean, he ended up with 4 catches on 5 targets against Denver. Didn't feel like that many. Didn't really feel like he made much of a mark. But I'll say more on Kittle. I think they do try to get him involved. Especially if they end up having to use Deebo, more as a runner than they'd like, just because of the situation that they're in with so many running backs down. I think that creates a situation where Kittle and Ayuk are essentially kind of your 1A receiving option. So I'll go more on Kittle. Second game back, should be a little healthier, should be able to make more of an impact.
Yeah, I feel like this prop that we're looking at right here is a prop of necessity for these teams going in. Mm-hmm. The 49ers have to get Kittle involved. And as I was talking about earlier, for the Rams to be the team that they want to be, they need to get Allen Robinson going. Sure, you can rely on Cooper Kupp. You can rely on the gunslinging of Matthew Stafford, but for how long? You got to be able to have a full complementing offense with the run game going. We saw Akers get going last week. Now it's time to get Robinson going. So for this, I actually like the more and more on the guys that need to step up for their teams. What's your view on the Robinson line?
Well, with Robinson, I mean, I was extremely high on Allen Robinson coming into the year. I thought this was going to be a perfect spot for him to finally have competent quarterback play, really for the first time in his entire life, dating all the way back to Penn State. And it hasn't looked good so far, right? I mean, it's been a weird fit. I think obviously week 1 against Buffalo, I was willing to throw that one out. It was just such a strange game, and the way Buffalo jumped on them early, I don't think the Rams could operate the way that they wanted. And then, we saw somewhat of a bounce back against Atlanta, and then back to just 2 for 23 on 5 targets against Arizona. And, part of it is this Rams offense is still a little bit disjointed. As we keep pointing out, Stafford's accuracy has been an issue as well. But I think they just need to use Allen Robinson a little more naturally and not try to force the ball his way. I mean, he's the ultimate complement, or at least on paper, he should be, to Cooper Kupp. And, if he comes out with another dud in this game, I think the alarm bells are officially going to be sounding, because, you got another tough defense in Dallas coming up in week 5. And, a lot of people are heavily invested in Allen Robinson when it comes to fantasy. With all that said, I mean, this is a pretty low number. I think it reflects certainly how this year has gone for Allen Robinson thus far. I'm going to go more. I think he can get to 40 yards in this game. And, even though I keep saying, they need to get him involved within the flow of the offense, I think at this point, we're still going to see Sean McVay, force the ball to Allen Robinson to at least try to establish something earlier in this game. So, with a line like this, all it takes, you get a 35-yard catch in the first quarter. not much to ask the rest of the game. So I think he can get there.
Yeah, he is a deep shot threat. We saw him adjust to the balls in Chicago, the way he was able to contort his body and come down with those receptions. I'm a Bears fan. You're a Jags guy.
Oh yeah.
You saw him catching balls from Blake Bortles. So
I saw
Mitch
the Jaguars
Trubisky is much better.
I saw the Jaguars choose to sign Marquise Lee over him. That was a where were you when type of day for me. A terrible idea. And of course, I mean, unfortunately, it didn't really work out for Robinson. He went from a bad situation to an even worse situation in Chicago.
So where were you?
I was at my apartment. I remember the day. I mean, where else would I be? I was at my apartment looking at my phone. I was like, the Jaguars will not retain Allen Robinson. And like, well, here we go. This is what we asked for.
All right, Deebo Samuel on the other side. We talked about him earlier, getting involved in the rushing game last week. 73 yards on 5 receptions, 8 targets, 58.5 yards receiving. I feel is doable.
It should be. It definitely should be. Again, it depends what the script ends up being for San Francisco. Are they able to move the ball whatsoever? Are they consistently, backed up? Like, I think one of the issues against Denver last week, because it felt like San Francisco was starting every drive at like the 5-yard line. Like both punters were in sicko mode the entire game, just pinning each team back. And I think that really limited what San Francisco felt comfortable doing. We obviously saw them take a safety in this game, but I think, they're not going to be as inept as they were last week. And I think this Rams defense, even though it is star-studded, maybe not as complete as some of the defenses that they've faced thus far. I think Denver is in that category as well. So I think they can get Deebo going. I mean, they virtually have to get him going, to have any sort of chance, I think, in this game to move the ball. So I'll go more on Deebo, 58.5.
Yeah, I think that's the right spot, the right play there. And then for a fantasy side, now, folks, just so you guys know, this is full PPR, 17.5 points. Full point per reception. The focal point of the offense, whether he's lined up at wideout, whether he's in the backfield, he could be running the ball. Odds are, if they're in the red zone, it's not odds are. If they're in the red zone, he is the go-to player. And the only reason they wouldn't go to him is to use him as a smokescreen, essentially. So I like the more for Deebo Samuel, 17.5 points, mixing in the rush. Again, a point last week, 5 points for catches. I love the monkey knife fight full PPR format when it comes to fantasy points for receivers.
Yep.
Because if you get a guy that has a target share like Deebo Samuel, this is more, you just have the natural passes going his way with a touchdown. Odds are it's a guy like Deebo Samuel, you're probably going to get there.
Yeah, I like betting his fantasy prop more than I would like his receiving or his rushing individual numbers. Like I think, he's the rare player, especially at his position, where you almost treat him like Christian McCaffrey at running back. It's kind of the reverse of that, where there's not many receivers out there who you're saying like, yeah, he could have 5 catches for 70, but he also might have 6 carries for 40 yards and a touchdown on the ground. So you have to factor that in. I would almost always take the more on Deebo's fantasy points. Like it just feels like the potential is always there. I know coming into the week, he's averaging closer to like 13, 14 fantasy points per game. But part of that too is, week 1 against the Bears, that slot fest, there's no scoring. He's fumbled a couple times this year. That's a little bit of a concern, but as long as he can stay healthy and make it through this game, I love the more on that number.
Well, might as well transition into a little touchdown dance. Seeing how we just talked about those two guys, I feel like it's a little obvious, but I'll say it anyway. Cooper Kupp, Deebo Samuel, the go-to guys in the red zone, the best 2 offensive weapons on each respective team. I got to ride with them. Now, who's the next pick? I feel like your third touchdown dance piece is all predicted based on how you think the game is going to go. If you're with San Francisco, I think maybe you're thinking Jeff Wilson to get into the end zone on possibly a tight goal line situation. If you're with the Rams, you saw what Akers did last week. He might be able to break one. So I really think people are going to be looking at this like, okay, who's going to win this game? What running back do I trust? It's hard to trust Cam Akers, what he did at the start of the season, but he turned it around last week. McVay is a guy that's about trust. He was saying he wanted to see that want from Akers early in the season. It looked like he showed it last week. I'll take Cam Akers.
I like it. I was thinking, maybe making the case for Darrell Henderson if you want to go a little bit off the board. I mean, Akers certainly looked like the better back last week, and we've seen a reversal already early on of how that workload was handled. Week 1, it was Darrell Henderson with double-digit carries. Akers didn't even play the first few series of that game, but now we're starting to see Akers come into his own, but still having some fumble issues. Fumbled again on the 1-yard line last week. I wouldn't be surprised if Cam Akers is the guy throughout the game, but then, all of a sudden it's 2nd and goal from the 1 and it's Darrell Henderson in there plowing in for a touchdown.
Yeah, well, he is their power back. I like that option. It makes a lot of sense. And then another name that's just been floating around due to his size and consistency in the Rams offense would be Higbee. I think that would be those kind of guys would be where I would focus on for my touchdown dance. If you're a Tyler Higbee fan, there's no harm in punching in Tyler Higbee too. Or if you have him in your fantasy team and you really just want to push for it and believe in yourself, why not use him in a touchdown dance?
Yeah, I like the Higbee call quite a bit. And who knows? I mean, maybe maybe they continue to kind of try to force it to Allen Robinson around the goal line. Like you mentioned earlier, like one of the great jump ball receivers in the league. And I'm never a fan of the fade from the 1 yard line, but NFL teams love it. Stafford has always loved it. You can kind of picture Allen Robinson, coming up with one in the back of the end zone as well.
It will be booming on Monday Night Football. You got to love the rivalry games on prime time. It's going to be great. Nick, you kind of already gave us your prediction at the start. Like you came in hot with it. I came in fumbling the ball. I was at the Who last night. What a concert. I'm wearing the sweater right now because it's freezing here in Canada. But how do you see the Rams getting it done? We'll get a little more specific because you already told us that you're going with the Rams, full disclosure. How do the Rams get it done? What's the projected game script?
Well, I wish I could tell you that because I don't feel as confident as I would like to. Got some significant interest riding on the Rams in this game. And, I woke up to the line moving a half a point in favor of the 49ers. It's never a great sign, never going to just make you feel super comfortable. The game was, of course, at San Francisco, which does add another element to it. But for me, I'm just so discouraged by what I saw from that Niners offense last week. And I know there's an argument to be made that they probably bounce back. I mean, there's no way they play that poorly 2 weeks in a row. You think back to that Seahawks game in week 2, they looked fantastic, but the Seahawks might be the worst defense in the league. They weren't able to move it against the Bears at all in week 1. And I know the elements were a big part of that, but still somewhat concerning. And the thing with me with the Rams is like, I feel like a lot of people are down on how the Rams have played. And part of that is getting blown out in week 1 by Buffalo. But I do think so many of their mistakes are just internal kind of mental things, like, all right, don't fumble the ball on the 1 yard line, just punch it in on the ground. Don't get fancy at the goal line. And I think a lot of these close games that they played the last 2 weeks would look a lot more definitive in favor of the Rams if they just clean those things up. And you're not going to have much of a room for error against the 49ers, compared to a team like Arizona or Atlanta. But I think as long as the Rams don't beat themselves, they're still the better team here.
Yeah, I'm completely with you on that. That's definitely the pick here. And I'm riding with the Rams too. Defending Super Bowl champions. It does seem though that the 49ers just always come to, like it makes sense. Divisional football. Mm-hmm. It's going to be, I'm more comfortable with the under for this than I am with picking an outright winner, mainly because as you said, the game's in San Francisco and divisional, I don't think a home advantage is more beneficial to any sport than football, maybe outside of like a bumping house in the NBA playoffs where you're that close to the court but yeah, I think it's gonna be a low scoring affair and I'm going to take the Rams. Nick, let the people know where they can find all your great content.
All right. Well, first of all, I'm glad we're aligned on the Rams. That gives me some comfortability. And I kind of like that under as well. I'm seeing the total around 42, 43. It's low, but feels like every week, every game is, scoring is so down across the league. But anyway, you can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Instagram at Whalen, but the L is a 1. So WHA1EN. There's no good way to say that, but I think that's about as cleanly as I can do it.
Way 1 in?
Way 1 in. Yeah. If you want to say it that way, that's fine. Way 1 in. Sure.
It sounds weird. It sounds like you're saying way 1 in, like a UFC weigh in. Like, well, weigh that guy in.
Weigh him in. I mean, if that's like the mnemonic device that you need to remember it, that's totally fine with me. It looks better written out than it does spoken. That's for sure.
All right, folks. That's Nick Whalen. I'm Conner Rowntree. Thanks for joining us and enjoy the football.